Hi guys, welcome back to Alamat, where we translate and narrate Asian myths, urban legends, and horror stories to share with the world. Our tale for this week is about the author's experience when they visited the Philippines for family events. This tale is called I Think I Got Hexed by an Asian Alien. In the ninth grade, I visited my family in the Philippines during winter break. Before I say what went down during the break, there are two facts that needed to be established. Number one, I had to attend two of my aunt's weddings. This experience takes place after the first wedding. And number two, I regularly get sick whenever I visit the islands. And I blame that on myself since I usually fast whenever I travel, and it's also hot as hell in there. The day after the first wedding, I woke up in the bed that I was sharing with my mom. It was hot, even in the morning, so I usually feel slightly uncomfortable when I wake up. However, this morning I felt a different sort of uncomfortable. When I got out of bed, I felt heavier than usual. After my mom was done with the bathroom, I went to take a cold shower. Usually, after taking a shower, I would feel much better. But this time, it was not the case. Even though the cold water had balanced out my body temperature and I no longer felt hot, I still felt uncomfortable. It was like this weird pressure that was being applied to my skin from within my body. When I got back to the room, I looked in the mirror of the dresser at the far side of the room. I stepped closer to the mirror and saw that my face was completely swollen. My mom noticed this as well and held my face up so she could see. She assumed that my skin was reacting this way due to the makeup I had worn for the wedding the previous day, because that was the natural answer. I never wear makeup, and the makeup I wore the day before was from a makeup artist that the bride hired. So, an allergic reaction from the makeup was a fair conclusion, and I believed it. We both assumed that the swelling would stop after a little bit and there should be nothing to worry about. We were staying at my mom's parents' house like we usually did, and my great uncle paid us a visit that morning. We ate breakfast with the rest of the family that was there. When I went back to the room, it had been an hour or so since I noticed my swollen face. And when I looked into the mirror, it was still swollen. And that was when I noticed it. My arms had tiny little red dots on it. Those weren't there when I woke up, so naturally, I started to panic. I brought this to my mom's attention. She assumed that it was the measles, but didn't want to take action too quickly. So, she told me to carry on about my day and just observe my skin. A few more minutes passed and I was constantly thinking about my skin. At some point, I sat down on the bed and looked at my legs, and they were almost completely covered in red dots. My panic rose. I showed my legs to my mom and her concern had risen along with my fear. She told me to take off my shirt. When I did, I looked into the mirror. My entire body was covered in small red dots. My mom had been a registered nurse for years, so her practice led her to believe that I had measles. However, one thing I said put doubt into her theory. Does your skin feel itchy? No. At this, another theory occurred in her head. The mood of the room shifted, and she told me to dress up and wait inside the room. After a few minutes, the entire family who had slept in the house had all congregated into our room. My cousins and I were on the far end of the room where the mirror was, and we were making jokes about how whack my skin looked, while the adults were on the other side of the room. They were all whispering and it seemed like a serious topic. Even though I couldn't hear them, it was obvious that they were talking about me, since every now and then they would take a glance at me, at my skin. Throughout this time period, my mom would ask me multiple times if my skin itched, and I would reply with something along the lines of, "It'll itch for a few seconds and then stop altogether." This, however, was not able to convince my mom's mind of the second conclusion she had come up with in her head. After a few more minutes of the adults talking, they all went downstairs. My mom told my cousins that she and I were going someplace with the majority of the adults, but Auntie D would stay there with them. So, it was me, my parents, my grandparents, and my great uncle in a white van, driving to what I assumed was another relative's house. There were multiple things that made me doubt this assumption, though. Number one, if we were visiting another relative, my other cousins would have been there in the van with us. Number two, the adults would usually talk during the drive, but this time it was completely silent the entire time. And number three, my mom would always tell me which relative we were visiting before we would start the drive, but she didn't tell me a single thing about what was going on. And when I asked her, she would simply ignore me or tell me, "Shh, everything will be fine." At some point, my mom calls my other aunt, Auntie M. We'll call her for the sake of the story. She was speaking in her native tongue. Another thing that felt off was that though I can barely speak my parents' native tongue, I was able to understand it enough. However, when my mom was speaking into the phone, I couldn't understand a single thing she was saying. So, I came into the conclusion that these were new words I had never heard her say before. Something uncommon. We arrived at my great aunt's house, and both my great aunt and my auntie hopped into the van. Then we began to drive again. And again, no one spoke to each other, or to me for that matter. I tried asking Auntie M what was going on, but she wouldn't answer me either. We drove for what seemed like an eternity, and then arrived at a house I had never seen before. We all stepped out of the van and into the house I didn't recognize. This was definitely not a relative's house. We walked through the side, and to my right, I saw three men I did not recognize watching TV. A woman came out from inside the house. Her body looked young, but worn. And to contrast, her face looked like she was 60. I sat down on a bench they had, and the woman spoke to my mom in hushed tones. And again, I did not understand anything they were saying, despite the fact that I could understand the native language perfectly. When the woman and my mom finished their conversation, the woman walked over to an outside shower that she had in her yard. She disappeared under the shower curtains, and we waited again for what felt like eternity. My Auntie M was sitting next to me and reassuring me that everything was going to be okay. This did nothing to calm my nerves, though since I don't know, there was a big problem to begin with. The woman came back and said something to my mom. My mom handed me a spare towel she took with her on the drive. She told me, "Go to the shower," points to the woman. She prepared hot water in there. "Your aunt will go inside with you and watch you shower. She will hold your clothes and towel." I found this extremely odd, since I had just taken a shower and I was plenty old enough to shower without someone supervising me. But I obliged. I took the towel and went to the shower. I took a shower with the hot water while my aunt watched me and assisted me with my towel and clothes. Afterwards, I got out and sat back down on the bench. The woman brought out a giant jug of liquid that I couldn't guess. She pumped out the liquid into a clear baggie. She then sat the bag of liquid down on a table next to her and soaked both of her hands in it. She rubbed her hands and approached me. "She is going to rub the coconut oil on you so you can get better," my mom told me. The woman took her oil-covered hands and put them to my face. The moment her hands made contact with my skin, I felt something grainy. She rubbed the oil all around my face, and the more she rubbed, the more grains I felt. "There's sand," she said in my native tongue. Sand. The thing that was emerging from my skin was sand. She rubbed oil on all of my limbs, and every time her hands came into contact with my skin, sand would come out. After she was done, she tied the bag of coconut oil and handed it to me. "Rub this on your body every now and then, and you should feel better by tomorrow," she told me. I took the bag. My mom handed her some peso, and we drove back to my grandparents' house. I stayed in the room the entire rest of the day. I asked my mom one final time what had just happened, and she told me I was hexed by a mangkukulam. A mangkukulam is a Filipino witch, and the woman we visited that day was an albularyo, a witch doctor. My mom had theorized that during the days prior to the first wedding, I had come into contact with a witch who decided to hex me because I was a foreigner. I am Filipino, but I live in America. I never speak English unless I am surrounded by family. So how some stranger found out I was foreign, I don't know. My guess is that it could have been a family friend who was able to physically get close to me. Believe it or not, I was let off easy. I did more research, and instead of having sand come out of the skin, it could have been glass or insects. By the way, the Philippines is a very nice place and actually very accepting and enthusiastic about foreign visitors. Please don't be discouraged or put off by my experience there. What do you guys think of this week's episode? I think the author was right. I think she got it easy. Just because some other Mangkukulam stories would be much more dire and very serious. If you're enjoying the content so far, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel to your friends and family. If you have stories you would want me to narrate, send them over at mralamatph@gmail.com. Salamat guys, and see you in the next one.